Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the Eritrean Cultural Festival 2021. Thank you all for coming today. This is a very amazing event for our community to know about their culture and their identity as Eritrean Muslims. We all have organized this monthly program. Every week, it's going to be an online event with different topics, inshallah, and on the final day, the last week, we're gonna celebrate it and about our culture and about our identity as Eritrean Muslims. It's gonna be a community event where everyone's gonna come in with their traditional clothing and bring traditional food, and we're all gonna have a great time. It's gonna be kids activities and many more, inshallah. We're gonna send more information about the location and timing, and all depends on the weather as well, because it's going to be an outdoor event, inshallah. Today, we're talking about Eritrea, about the past, present, and future of Eritrea. As Eritrean Muslims, it's important that we, especially us and our children, know who they are and where they are from. And that's why it's so important for us to organize this event, to create awareness about it, to educate our people, especially the young generation and the future generation coming up, so they don't forget their country, Eritrea. Again, this is nothing political. This is very important. No matter where you are, where you go, in the end, you are Eritrean Muslim, and it is very important that we make sure that we know everything about our country, and about make sure that our children know who they are, where they're from, regarding their identity, inshallah. So today I got a special guest, inshallah, uh, brother Abdurrahman Said, and he will tell you more about himself, and he will be telling us about taking us back to Eritrea, and telling us about the past, present, and future, inshallah. I'm gonna just add him here, inshallah, with us. Assalamu alaikum, brother Abdurrahman. How are you?
Alaikum. Hello. Alhamdulillah. I'm fine, brother Nuruddin. And
Well,
assalamu alaikum to all your viewers.
yeah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. May Allah reward you for making the time and the effort to come today and to tell us about Eritrea. I mean, there's many of us don't really know much. Our parents, came as refugees to different countries here in the UK, for us in that sense, and they had many challenges in that sense, and for us as their children growing up in Western society with different cultures, we kind of don't know much about our Eritrean culture in that sense, and I know some people that don't even identify themselves as Eritreans, unfortunately. So, but it's important for us to educate people about Eritrea, and I know you're an expert in this field. So thank you so much for coming today, and then I'm gonna give the platform to you, inshallah, from now.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you can hear me very well. My name is Abdurrahman Sayed, and I'm privileged to be speaking to you today. These days are very important days in the history of Eritrea. They are very important because they coincide with the 30th independence of Eritrea, 30th anniversary of Eritrean independence. So May 24th, which is just about a couple of weeks from today ago, was the 30th anniversary. And then on the 20th of June this month, there's going to be the annual day for martyrs, Eritrean martyrs, who made that independence possible in 1991. So that's the significance of this period. Now, when we talk about Eritrea, do we all know where Eritrea is located? It's located in the Horn of Africa, which is in the northeast of Africa. And it has a very small location by the Red Sea, southern Red Sea. The name itself was derived from a Greek word for the Red Sea, which is referred to as Sinos Eritreos. So I guess Eritrea means in Greek language red, and Sinos is the sea. So the Red Sea is where Eritrea is located. I'll show you on the map in a minute. The reason it was called Eritrea, it was in 1889, 1889-90, it became an Italian colony. And then, as any colonizers coming from faraway European countries, they decided what to call this new colony of theirs, and they chose the name Eritrea. So it was the Italians who chose the name for us as Eritrea, and we love it, of course. Luckily, it reflects the Red Sea, and we are Red Sea people, so that's absolutely fine. Let me share with you the map, and so we can hopefully see what we are talking about. So the map is going to be from Google Maps, and hope we can all see it now. Can you see Eritrea? Is there a possibility of checking that, Noradin?
Yeah, we can see it on the screen, inshallah.
No problem. Okay, so here it is. This is Eritrea. It is the same size as England. So United Kingdom or Great Britain is composed of four nations. One of them is England, where we live, which is London is also located in England, southeast of England. And then we have Scotland to the north, uh, Wales to the west, and then Northern Ireland, far west. So Eritrea is the same size as England, not Great Britain, not United Kingdom, but England. So that's one of the four components of the United Kingdom. The size is 120,000 square kilometers. And as you can see here it is, the ones in color. And obviously you can see the town of Keren here, but there are major towns in Eritrea, which include the capital city, Asmara. It is in the center around this area where the name Eritrea is. And then there's Agordat here and Barentu, Naqfa, the historic town where the fighters, once they've liberated it in 1977, they never allowed the Ethiopians to come back and reoccupy it as they did with so many other parts of Eritrea. And here in the southern tip of Eritrea, we have Asab, a very important port city. And from Asab, there is a road that takes you all the way to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa. So the Ethiopians use to import and export their goods through Asab when they occupied Eritrea. But after occupation, through some kind of arrangement with the Eritrean government, they could still use the port like without compromising the sovereignty of it as an Eritrean territory, but paying services to the Eritrean government. To the south here, we have Ethiopia, and over here we have Djibouti, a small country. Djibouti is also another port city that the Ethiopians use to import and export goods. And here to the east, we have Somalia. So many of you probably have Somali friends. So Somalia is a very large country in terms of sea coasts, but not larger than Ethiopia. But it has a very long sea coast on the Indian Ocean, which is this part, and up to the Red Sea over here. It oversees the Gulf of Aden. And some of the important cities in Somalia are Hargeisa, Bur'o, Bosaso over here, and then to the south, Mogadishu, the capital city, is found here. Somalia used to be also an Italian colony, the same as Eritrea, but only one part of Somalia. This part of Somalia over here is part of Ethiopia or occupied by Ethiopia. And then here, the northern part of Somalia, which is known as Somaliland, was part of a British colony. So that's our Somalian neighbors. They may be our neighbors here in London and UK, but they're also our neighbors in Eritrea. And some of our Eritreans who speak the languages like Saho and Afar, they can probably understand Somali language and vice versa. because there are strong similarities in the vocabularies of these languages. I'll talk about them in a minute about the Eritrean languages. Here is the Red Sea, and over here we have Dahlak archipelago, which is a group of islands. And in here, there are also small islands over here. Across the Red Sea, many of you might know Yemen. It's also another neighboring country. And over here, it's Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, as you can see, Saudi Arabia, many of you might have lived in Jeddah, Mecca, Taif, or Riyadh. So you're not very far from Eritrea when you live it in Saudi. That's Riyadh over here, and the nearest Saudi port to Eritrea is the Jazan or Jizan. You might have heard about it. It's straight opposite Eritrea, and it's not that far. To the west of Eritrea, north and west, is Sudan. Khartoum is here and Port Sudan. So this is Sudan to the west and north of Eritrea. So this is really Eritrea, and then you've got Egypt, which is also not very far north of Sudan. And after Egypt, we have the Mediterranean Sea, and across the Mediterranean Sea, then we see Europe here. There's Turkey, and over here, our colonizer, Italy. Italy came all the way from here to colonize Eritrea in here. So you can see Italy, Turkey is here, and then the rest of the countries, and UK is also over here. So on the African map, you can see Eritrea. It can be considered as northeast of Africa. That's Africa. So we're in the northeast of Africa. And you can see now clearly the neighbors of Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, and across the sea, Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Eritreans were known to travel on foot from Eritrea all the way through Sudan to Egypt, to Azhar University to study there. And the Eritrean capital city is, of course, Asmara. I don't know how many of you might have been to Asmara, but it's a beautiful town, mainly created by the Italians, and they still maintained the art and the architecture of the country from the Italian days. And so many people, in fact, including UNESCO, they have made it a World Heritage because of the many of the buildings in Asmara are very important historical buildings in terms of art, and those who are interested in architecture of towns from old days. Many of them were built in the 1930s. And it still maintains its cleanliness and its beauty very well, like tree shaded streets and pavements. It's actually, many people think when they're in Asmara, they feel like as if they are in an Italian town. That is Asmara. This is also another part of Asmara. And this is one of the popular icons in Asmara, which is the Catholic Cathedral. And over here, it's another beautiful architecture in the shape of a plane. It's a service station where you can buy petrol. That's the full picture of this station. I think it's during its construction period. That's the cathedral building, and that's also the same building from outside. This is also from outside, so many young people love to hang around this place, especially in the evenings. Yeah, it's such a beautiful. The port city of Massawa is also another beautiful spot. That's to the east of Eritrea. It was heavily damaged during the war. As you can see, these are some of the historical buildings in Massawa, the port city. In 1990, February 1990, it was liberated, but at a huge cost, of course, to the properties as well as to human lives. Great. And let me just show you some Eritrean towns. Maybe they might be of interest to you. The Eritrean major towns, as I said, Asmara is the capital city, Massawa is the port city, and then Asab and other places like Karan, Agordat, Sanei. These are all Eritrean towns, but relatively compared to the major towns, they're quite small. So Asmara itself, its population, I think around 500,000 population, probably now around 800,000. The rest of the towns are quite small, so not above 100,000, um, the major ones, and the rest could be anything between 20 to 80,000 population. Okay, so that is Eritrea. Now, with the maps, I've just shared with you a bit of its history. It came into existence in 1890 when the Italians occupied it and made it a colony, an Italian colony. So that's where the contemporary history of Eritrea starts. Starts 1889, 90 officially. It was declared a colony.
Rahman, sorry, I don't want to disturb you, but the one of the comments was if you could put your uh,
Screen?
voice up, no, voice up.
Oh, voice, okay.
Yeah, to be more louder. They couldn't hear you that well. And sorry, and for the viewers, please share it. You can leave a comment as well, inshallah, and share it. If you have any questions as well, leave a comment, and we will share that comment with brother Abdurrahman, inshallah, and hopefully he can answer your questions. And please share it to family and friends and everyone in the community. This is a great opportunity for people to learn about Eritrea past, present, and future. It will be summarized, inshallah, and then they can take it from there and do the more studies and more research, inshallah.
Okay.
Jazakallah khair.
وياك إن شاء الله. I hope you can hear me better now. Now, just to talk to you a little bit about Eritrean languages as well. You probably speak some of those languages yourselves, but let's see. Let's see. We can share some of the languages. Can I ask, or can you write on the text, and Nuruddin can read them, the languages you speak or your parents speak in Eritrea? Quickly. Okay. Can you see them, Nuruddin?
Yeah, I'm waiting for people
It's
to comment. Once I leave the comment on YouTube, on Facebook, you can send your comment, inshallah. Tell us what languages you speak, and then Abdurrahman can share, inshallah.
So in Eritrea, of course, officially the government says there are 9 languages, but I assume there could be slightly higher than just 9 languages. I think we have about 11 languages in Eritrea, but obviously the number of their speakers could be anything from a few thousand people to about a million and plus. But the major 9 languages in Eritrea is the Afar language, which is spoken in the southern Red Sea. I'll show you the map in a minute. And then you've got Arabic, which is spoken not just by the Rashaida tribes, but by so many Eritreans. In fact, for many Eritrean Muslims, Arabic is like a lingua franca because the Eritrean Muslims speak all the 9+ languages in Eritrea. So between them to communicate, they have a common language, which is called lingua franca. So they use Arabic as a common language. Sometimes also they use Tigray as a common language, and Tigrinya in some cases in the highlands, southern highlands of Eritrea. And maybe during the Italian time, I don't know, maybe people were using Italian language because a lot of our elders, like grandfathers and others, they speak fluent Italian. So Italian was also quite well integrated into the language of Eritrea. Um, the intellectual Eritreans mostly speak Arabic and English. English is also very important working language in Eritrea. Since 1941, Eritrea was using English as a medium of education. So all the schools would teach in English, not just teach the language as a language, but they teach every subject, every topic in English, especially from the junior school upwards. So that's junior secondary school and university. So a lot of Eritreans would have graduated in English as engineers, as accountants, as any field of study. So English is very much a working language in Eritrea, and you would have no problem using English to communicate with mostly educated Eritrean class. So that's one of the languages is Afar. This is in alphabetical order, and then we have Arabic, and then we have Blin or Bilain, that is spoken in the center of Eritrea around Karen, and then we have Bedawit. Bedawit is the language spoken by our Bija tribes in western Eritrea and northwestern Eritrea. And the same speakers of Bedawit, you would also find them in eastern Sudan. So that's the tribal link we have with the Sudan. And then we have Konama in the southwest of Eritrea, and Nara in around the same area. So these are the people of the Gash region. I'll show you the regions in a minute. But the Kunama and Nara, and also Tigray speakers or Tigrayt speakers share areas in Gash and Barka. Recent times, also some Tigrinya speakers moved there as farmers, and they share the same area of Gash. But mainly Gash is known for its Kunama and Nara inhabitants. And then we have Saho, which is widely spoken in southern Eritrea and also eastern Eritrea by the Red Sea. Saho speakers are there as neighbors and also speaking more or less bilingual or trilingual in some case with the Tigray speakers and the Afar speakers. So they all live in the eastern or the Red Sea shores or eastern Eritrea. And the south then would go as far as the highlands of Akalogzai to the border with Ethiopia. And then we have a Tigray language, which is spoken from eastern Eritrea around Massawa all the way to the Sahel and Barka, north and west of Eritrea, and also central of Eritrea around Karen area. Actually, maybe not very far also from Asmara, you would find the capital city, you would find Tigray speakers. Tigrinya is spoken mainly in the southern regions, so that would include the Asmara region and then Aklogzai, Sarai, and Hamasin. These are the regions that where Tigrinya are spoken. But many of them have also migrated to the other parts of Eritrea. So there is a lot of Tigrinya speakers living also in other parts of Eritrea. The people running the country now, the government, are very much dominated by Tigrinya speakers. So they more or less influence the whole country to speak in Tigrinya because it's the language of the rulers. It's not always happily accepted by the speakers of other languages because they feel their languages have been marginalized, including Arabic. But in general, in terms of language, it's not really a huge problem as long as it's not politically imposed on people. Tigrinya and Tigray are very similar. They're very they come from the same source. It's called Giz. So and they're also they belong to the family of Semitic languages, which include Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic. All these languages are called Semitic languages, and that includes Tigray, Tigrinya in Eritrea, and Amharic in Ethiopia. The Saho and Afar and the Somali languages are quite related, and they are known as Cushitic languages. So that's how they classify the language. So some of you might be speakers of Saho, or your parents might speak in Saho, others in Afar or Blaine or Tigray or Tigrinya, or even Arabic. So I know many Eritrean families use Arabic because it's easier to learn and to access information through that language without any problem. And many Eritreans feel Arabic is not only their common language, but also it's their first language because of the Quran and the importance it has in terms of research and sciences, philosophy, and all the translations that has been made in Arabic. It's easily accessible for Arabic speakers. The other reason for that is the all the other languages, most of the other languages are not written. Recently, there has been attempts to write the Afar and the Kunama and also the Saho languages in Latin alphabets, with Latin alphabets, just like the Somalis do. But I'm not sure how far it's been developed and widely used. Most of those educated class, they would have either studied in English or Arabic, and they're quite comfortable with that while using their mother tongue in their homes and with their immediate communities. They're quite comfortable and easily use Arabic as a lingua franca, as I said earlier. The same with the Nara and Kunama. I think they still try to write their language in Latin alphabets, but it's not widely used at present, I think. Bedouin, mostly they speak or use Arabic. Tigray speakers, although Tigray and Tigrinya are written in what is called the Ge'ez or Sabaean alphabets, but Tigray speakers, because of their religious dominance as Muslims, but also because of its proximity to the Arabic language, many of its educated class, of Tigray speaking educated class, they would just use Arabic as a kind of like official language or main language and use Tigray just for their mother tongue, like to communicate within their immediate communities if they need to, and also to express some of their traditions and poems. Tigrinya is still well maintained in terms of its use. Many of its speakers use to write it and to also sing in it and address politics and everything else in Tigrinya. So it's quite well used, and the alphabets used for that is the Sabaean alphabets or the Giz alphabets. I'll try to find the alphabets for you and show you, inshallah.
Sorry, Abdulrahman, one of the viewers is asking if you put the volume up on maybe on your laptop and then speak a bit more louder so they can hear better. They said. Sorry to disturb you.
That's fine. I don't have anything to mute. I mean to raise the volume on my laptop. Let me just see. Audio. No, I'm not sure. Really, I don't think I can do much about this. It's saying it's quite high.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. At least the volume is high. And then just your voice, because some of them are saying the volume is a bit low. Would you mind talking a bit louder?
Okay, I am trying, inshallah. Okay, so I just spoke to you about the languages. Let's see if we can share something around the administrative regions of Eritrea. Okay, administrative regions of Eritrea. Okay, yeah, we got it. Yes, I hope you can see the screen now. Eritrea has 6 administrative regions. So this is the one of the regions, which is the southern Red Sea, and this is the northern Red Sea region. In here, you would find Massawa, one of the main cities here, and here in the southern Red Sea, Asab, the one I showed you earlier. This is the southern region where Tigrinya speakers reside, and some also Saho and Tigray speakers would be found around here. So in this area and Tigray speakers around this area, but mainly it's Tigrinya. To the south is obviously Ethiopia, and you have immediately you would find around this area here, very close to the southern region, Tigray, where there are problems at present. This is the Gash Perka area, which I mentioned to you earlier. The Nara and Kunama people reside in here, and the northern part of Gash Barka would be Tigray speakers. This is the central region, which is where Asmara is located, Asmara as the city. And here we have the Ansaba region, which Karen is their capital city. So that's the regional administration of Eritrea. That's how it's divided into 6 regions. So each region would supposedly have a governor and then its own assembly where they can elect their own legislators as well as governors. Unfortunately, that's not the case for now. It's almost ruled as a kind of like military administration with military commands. But this is how the regions are divided. Okay, so now we spoke a bit about the Eritrean languages, history, geography, and so on. In terms of the phases Eritrea went through, from 1890 to 1941, it was an Italian colony. So we were part of Italy, or we were ruled by Italy. And then 1941, Italy was defeated by Britain. The reason for that is Italy became an ally of Germany during the Second World War, and therefore Britain declared war on Germany. The whole Europe and the whole world was in a mess during the Second World War. So the war was not conducted only in Europe, but it also extended to other parts where there were Italian or German or whoever of the fighting forces were. So Eritrea was under Italian colony, and Sudan and northern Somalia, as I mentioned earlier, were under British occupation or colonization. So the British forces came to Eritrea, fought the Italians and defeated them. And they promised the Eritrean people they would give them independence because the Eritreans were also fed up because of the Italian fascist colonialism. They were happy to see their country free and independent so they can rule themselves. So the British promised that, and with that, the occupation of Eritrea by British forces was made possible and a lot easier than it could have been. So once the British occupied Eritrea, they established what they called their provisional military administration. And that's the military administration of the British until the Eritreans decide, or the world decide what to do with Eritrea. So the British ruled Eritrea from 1941 to 1952. Now that's a period of 11 years. Um, it had a lot of events. One of them, unlike during the Italian colonization, the British allowed for Eritreans to study, to go to schools, and to even learn different subjects and so on. During the Italian colonization time, Eritreans were not allowed education. They would only be allowed to attend 4 classes up to 4th grade to learn Italian language and to learn Italian history, who made Italy great, and then to become very good servants of the Italians, either as soldiers or workers and so on in the factories. So they did not really allow Eritreans to be educated, so they do not challenge the Italian colonization. When the British came, they have allowed Eritreans to attend class beyond or above the 4th grade. And for the first time, Eritreans were graduating as teachers, as officials in the administration, and so on. So that's one good thing about the British colony. It allowed education in Eritrea. The second good thing about the British colony was also allowing Eritreans the political freedom to associate, to create associations like labor associations and political parties. So they've allowed that to happen. The third one, they've also allowed free press, which in Eritrea in the 1940s, early 50s, there were 20 newspapers and magazines that were published in Eritrea. Mostly were written in Arabic. Some were also written in Tigrinya and Italian. Okay, is there rule of law in Eritrea? Okay, I think I can see now the questions. That's very good. Remind me of this question. I'll come back to it. Now, so the 1940s was a time when Eritreans became aware of their national identity, and they wanted to really aspire and achieve independence for their country through their political movements and their labor movements and so on. Unfortunately, then Ethiopia, which is a landlocked country, which has no access to the sea unless it has to go through Djibouti or Somalia or Eritrea, it wanted to have access to the sea. So it started to claim if it can come back or if it can occupy Eritrea in one way or the other, either as a whole country or as part, especially the southern tip of the Red Sea, which is where Assab is. The British loved the idea, I guess, and they helped the Ethiopian king to go back to his throne in 1941 after he was deposed by the Italians. So they said, okay, maybe we can consider partitioning Eritrea into two. So we can give one half of Eritrea, including the port of Assab and even Massawa, to Ethiopia, with Asmara and the southern region. And then the second half would be incorporated into the Sudan, which was ruled by Britain at the time until 1956. So they entertained that idea and they tried to impose or propose it to the Eritreans. But the Eritreans were not interested in that. They refused it. Both Muslims and Christians, highlanders, lowlanders from every part of Eritrea, they were not happy to see their country to be partitioned into two and then disappear from the world map. They said, no, we don't want that. We want to become independent, and that's what we want, and we will fight for. So the partition project failed, which was proposed by the British in the 1940s. Then the Ethiopians had to devise another way of trying to access Eritrea, and that was to create division between Muslims and Christians of Eritrea. And for the Christians, mostly they follow the Orthodox Church, which is the same church as the Ethiopian Christians, or majority of them. So they tried to influence the church, and through the church, the population who follow the church. To some extent, they did succeed. So a Christian-dominated party was established to ask for Eritrea to be united with Ethiopia, and then an independent majority or predominantly led by Muslims was created also to counter-challenge this union or unionist party to call for full Eritrean independence. So the division started to appear in the Eritrean political elite by some of them following the unionists and the other following the pro-independence blocs. And then the dispute went all the way to New York, to the United Nations in 1949, and people started to speak about what should happen to Eritrea. So the unionists presented their case, saying that they have a large following and they would like to be part of Ethiopia. And the pro-independence also presented their case, saying, no, actually they have the majority of Eritreans in favor of independence. And that includes Christian Eritreans, not only Muslims. And then as a compromise solution, the United Nations, influenced by the United States, who were very good friends of the Ethiopian monarch, they said, okay, yes, the Eritreans deserve, and this is word for word, actually, what was said by the US Foreign Secretary, or at the time, I think they still call them Secretary of State, they call them. Here in the UK, we call them uh, Foreign Secretary or Secretary of Foreign Affairs and Commonwealth. In the US, they're called the Secretary of State. Don Foster Dulles, his name was, and he said, yes, Eritreans deserve to have self-determination and independence. However, our strategic interest, that's as a US, it's best served if we federated Eritrea with Ethiopia. So federation was a kind of like compromise solution. And that it means federation is like a marriage between two units. The two units would have their own administration, autonomous administration, their own governments in each country, and then they would have shared government where they come together to govern the federation as a whole. So they have independence internally, and then union externally or at the above. And that became a compromise solution. It maintained Eritrea as an entity, united, undivided, and it also um, did not allow Eritrea to become fully independent, but to be linked to Ethiopia through a federal arrangement. However, the Ethiopians at the time, they were not ready. Ethiopia was at the time ruled by an absolutist monarch. That is like the king was everything. He was the law unto himself. Whatever he says happens. He was the legislator, he was the executive, he was everything. So it was like an absolute rule from top down. And people saw him as a kind of like a holy person, like no one would criticize or anything like that. On the other side, in Eritrea, you had the press freedom I mentioned to you earlier that was introduced by the British in the 1940s. You had the labor movement, the political movements. So there was a lot of freedoms, democracy, and so on. And that did not comfort the Ethiopian king. They felt immediately, oh, this is going to be a threat, because if other Ethiopians see what's Eritrea and how it manages itself, they will demand the same, because Ethiopia itself is actually created almost as a kind of like colonial state. A lot of nations around Ethiopia were actually occupied by force and incorporated into the Ethiopian kingdom. So these people might also need to have the same autonomy, the same freedoms that the Eritrean were enjoying. So they felt very uncomfortable with the federal arrangement. They've accepted it only so that it can give them some access to Eritrea and then occupy Eritrea. And immediately, in fact, 2-3 years after the arrangement in 1952, which is the second phase, the Ethiopians started to violate the federal arrangement, and the Eritreans started to feel, oh, this is not good, because now we're even losing our autonomy as an Eritrea, an entity with our own flag and our own government. The Ethiopians are interfering, and they're trying to rule us from Addis Ababa straight through their representative in Asmara and so on, and undermining the Eritrean autonomy and autonomous administration. So by 1955, it became clear that Ethiopians were not interested in Eritrean autonomy. They would just swallow it altogether and make it just part of them to be ruled from Addis Ababa directly by the Ethiopian king. So they've started encroaching into the Eritrean jurisdiction, and by 1958 they almost lowered the Eritrean flag. They started intimidating the Eritrean pro-independence politicians. By 1962, they officially declared Eritrea was part of Ethiopia. No more independence, no more autonomy or anything. Now, Eritreans who've already seen the encroachments of the Ethiopians, they did not wait until they officially declared it that Eritrea was now part and parcel of Ethiopia in 1962. Instead, they started challenging throughout the 1950s. And by 1958, they decided and resolved to create an Eritrean Liberation Movement. That's the ALM, with its main aim to liberate Eritrea from Ethiopian occupation and to reinstate its independence fully without any kind of federal or non-federal links with Ethiopia. So that's the struggle. The third phase of the struggle of Eritreans began in 1958. And by 1961, just about a year before Ethiopians declared Eritrea part of Ethiopia, the Eritreans declared armed struggle, which is the one that began in 1961 and ended in 1991. 30 years of armed struggle. So many genocides and destructions happened in Eritrea, which have not been spoken about yet, and the Ethiopians have never been asked or even volunteered to apologize, let alone to compensate us for all the crimes they committed in our country during those years. Many of you or your parents would have fled the country during this period of 30 years of war, where the whole country was under curfew. For people in my generation, we were born during the war and grew up during the war, and we've never seen any kind of like freedom. At nighttime you cannot move around. In many times, like, we cannot move from outside our towns, so we would be just confined in our towns, and outside the towns there would be checkpoints, so you're not allowed to pass through without being checked in those army checkpoints. So it was very much like an occupied territory for 30 years of war. 1991, it became liberated, and in 1993, the Eritreans very cleverly wanted to show the world what the Eritrean wish was. Yes, by force, by military force, we defeated the Ethiopian army, the Ethiopian occupation army. But then we wanted to show the world that we are also interested in democracy, and we were happy for the people to vote whether they want to become fully independent or be part of Ethiopia. So I think the leadership of the time of the liberation movement were very clever to have adapted that approach. So in 1993, the United Nations agreed to send its own observers to observe the referendum where Eritreans were asked to vote, and indeed they did vote by 99.8% in favor of full independence. So officially, then Eritrea became a sovereign independent member of the United Nations. Ethiopia also, the governing party in Ethiopia, which was led by the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, recognized the Eritrean independence, alhamdulillah, and that allowed for other nations and countries to recognize the Eritrean independence, and the United Nations and others. So we are very much like happy that at the time there was a friendly government in Ethiopia, because if the Ethiopians had they refused to recognize Eritrean independence at the time, even though they were militarily defeated, the recognition would have been very, very difficult. You may hear about Chechnya or Somaliland and some other parts of the world where they declare independence because they are in full control of their territories, but because of non-recognition of the other states that was occupying them. In the case of Chechnya, for example, the Russian government; in the case of Somaliland, the government in Mogadishu and others. So the recognition becomes a problem, because if you do recognize and the other state disputes it, the legitimate sovereign state, then you get into problems, interstate problems. It's almost like declaration of war, and so on. So it's not easy to achieve recognition, even if you control and occupy your country. So I think, again, another smart move by the Eritrean Liberation Movement leaders was to create Ethiopian allies, Ethiopian Liberation Movement, or Ethnic Liberation Movement, if you like, who then jointly defeated the Ethiopian governments, and then they took over Ethiopia as the new rulers. And these people were very understanding of the Eritrean condition, so they did not hesitate to recognize Eritrean independence, and that allowed the African Union, the European Union, the United Nations, and the so many countries of the world to recognize Eritrean independence from that day. So we are now 30 years old from the day of liberation. and just about 2 years less from the day of our sovereign, independent, recognized member of the United Nations. This is Eritrea. Unfortunately, someone was asking whether Eritrea, would they can leave or visit Eritrea, and if there's any rule of law. At present, unfortunately, there isn't a rule of law in Eritrea. I'm afraid to say that. There's the rule of one person dictatorship, and who rules just top down, just like the Ethiopian monarchs. But unfortunately, Ethiopian monarchs had some acceptance by some Ethiopians. In the case of Eritrea, they came as liberators, as fighters. They liberated the country, and they had promises they've made to themselves, to their members, and to the Eritrean people to turn the country into multi-party democracy, but they failed on that promise. They did not fulfill the promise. So the president is now is everything. He's the cabinet. He's the legislature. He's the judiciary. He's everything. He does everything he wants without any um, recourse to any kind of institutional accountability, constitutional accountability. There's no constitution in the country. There was attempts to create a constitution in the 1990s, but again, that was thrown away, and the president is now everything in the country. Universities, we've only had one university, unfortunately, and by now we could have had 6, 7 universities in every administrative region. But then the university was also seen by the rulers of Eritrea as a source of threat, because student movements can start from universities, especially those who attend classes of law and social sciences, political science, and so on. So they did not want that. They closed the university, and then they created like what they call colleges in every part of the country. And these colleges are more of a kind of like technical and vocational training centers. They just produce Eritreans with good skills to become professionals in maybe medicine and other vocational courses. I'm not sure if they still like to teach people law and social sciences. They don't like them, and I've never heard of schools that teach social science or political science or law. Those things, those subjects are still not widely available to Eritreans within those colleges. They're more of a technical college. In terms of tourist attractions in Eritrea, yes, there are so many tourist attractions. And by the way, it's one of the safest countries in the world. So if you visit Eritrea as a foreigner, there's nothing to worry about. It's a very peaceful, safe country. Also, if you're like Eritrean but not involved in politics, you're also safe. You can visit your country. Obviously, you have to be very careful when you do visit the country. You don't have to criticize the government outside or inside, and you have to pay certain tax that they require from Eritreans residing abroad. One of the famous ones is the 2% tax, but there are so many other taxes also that they would ask people to pay. So in terms of like tourist attractions, yes, it's got a very long shore of Red Sea in the country, which is beautiful, very like unspoiled coastline of about 1,000 kilometers. And that's a beautiful place to visit, like to go to Massawa and enjoy swimming or diving there. The other thing is there are some historical sites also in Eritrea, especially around a place called Haito, and also around Massawa, the old historical places. And in fact, even in Massawa, there is the Sahaba Mosque. You probably heard about the migration of the Sahaba. The first migration of the Sahaba was to Abyssinia, was to Eritrea, because Abyssinia is the whole area, like Eritrea, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Somalia, even Sudan. They considered themselves to be as part of the historic Abyssinia. So when the Sahaba, the first migration, in fact, two of the first migration before Medina was made to the part where Eritrea is now. So in Eritrea, you find something called Masjid al-Sahaba in Masawa. And this Masjid al-Sahaba, its Qibla is towards Jerusalem. And it's the first masjid in the whole world. Now, people sometimes say it's the first masjid in Africa. It's wrong. Uh, People say Masjid al Quba in Medina is the first masjid which was built by the Prophet. ﷺ. Again, it's wrong. The first masjid was actually built in Eritrea, in Masawa, and that's Masjid al Sahaba, which was built by the Sahaba themselves, which included Ja'far al Tayyar, Uthman Abu Affan, and the daughters of the Prophet, like I think Ruqayya and Zainab. 80 of the Sahaba and the companions and the cousins and daughters of the Prophet joined the first Hijrah and the second Hijrah. Now, um, at the time, the Muslims in Mecca were prosecuted, so they were not allowed to publicly pray, let alone have a masjid. So they were hunted down. They were not allowed. So that's why the masjid in Eritrea is the first masjid in the whole world, including in, yeah, Jazakallah khair, bravo. That's the Masjid Sahaba. So it is very important historical site. And a lot of people can come and learn more about the Sahaba themselves and the Hijrah. The first two hijras to Eritrea, and then the third hijrah was to Medina years later. Yani. So and Alhamdulillah, so there are also Christian monasteries inside Eritrea. There are historical monuments from the probably Greek times, very old historical monuments. And some people have also been saying the recent archaeological excavations have discovered old cities and old churches. So Eritrea is really for archaeologists and those studying archaeology. It would be a very, very important site to study and to uncover a lot of the uncovered history of that region. It's still there to be exploited. So, and then, as I said, Asmara is one of our World Heritage in terms of modernist architecture. So those of you studying architecture to become civil engineers, visit Asmara and you'll enjoy the old modernist architecture built by Italian architects in the country, still maintained and kept intact. So it's got a very beautiful history there for architects. And as I said, also for the archaeologists and for those who want to join and enjoy the Red Sea, just swim and have some good time. You've got it there, especially around Massawa. It's not well developed tourist area, but it's still a beautiful place. Now, any other questions? I would show it to my children who I teach one day for their history. Excellent. Yes, you could do that. Thank you for spending your time. I'm not Muslim, neither am I Eritrean, but I'm a historian. I teach in schools, and this is very beneficial, and I would recommend this to everyone I know. So keep it up. Thank you very much. You're most welcome. And as I said, Eritrea is a very welcoming place. Despite the 30 years of brutal war, uh, I only came to realize once I came to live abroad in the UK and engaging and interacting with different communities, how peaceful our community is, our population. And I always lived in Eritrea where a foreign visitor is considered like a guest by every Eritrean and would be protected. So even if there are some bad Eritreans, they would be bad to each other, but not to a foreign citizen. I used to think that's the case wherever you go, but I realized that when I hear now about kidnappings and all these things, I immediately realized our people must have been quite unique. Even we had war with Ethiopia for 30 years, occupation, genocides, and all sorts of things. But you can find easily Eritreans and Ethiopians as civilians. They're very friendly, and if we speak each other's languages, we can easily even become more than friends. We can intermarry and so on. And in the history of Eritrean struggle, I've never heard where Ethiopian civilians were deliberately targeted and attacked. And again, that never happened, whether in Eritrea or even in Ethiopia. So there is a lot of unique thing about the Eritrean struggle itself to study, and especially for those who are interested in history and comparative analysis between the liberation struggles of the world or of Africa. You can look at this very interestingly, and I'm sure you'll uncover lots of secrets which are embedded in the Eritrean tradition and history, which everyone should be happy and proud of. To know that the Eritreans, despite all the atrocities committed against them and the civilians by the Ethiopian governments, not the Ethiopian people, they've never retaliated against Ethiopian civilians and people. Unfortunately, these days, of course, in northern Ethiopia, we hear a lot of atrocities committed by Eritrean army and Ethiopian army and so on in the civil war that's going on in Ethiopia just recently, last 3-4 months. But again, a lot of Eritreans have difficulties to accept that Eritreans would do that intentionally. But obviously, no one would agree and accept any atrocity against any civilians, whether it's in Ethiopia, in Eritrea, or any part of the world. And many Eritreans, including myself, have been calling for independent investigation to those allegations. And if they're proven to be true, then to hold those who are responsible accountable, because sometimes soldiers are only soldiers. They obviously follow orders of their leaders, and therefore those who are issuing any orders to attack or harm civilians would then be brought to justice to account for their deeds. And if it's only the soldiers themselves doing this, then the leaders would be expected to hold those responsible, again, accountable through their own court martial or whatever procedures they may have. But in general, I think as Eritreans, we should be happy and proud of our history. And I think within our communities in the diaspora, we're also very well known for being shy and polite and also peaceful. In the crime rates, you don't hear a lot of Eritreans involved. I think, in fact, so many people even do not know Eritreans exist in their neighborhoods. Sometimes when I come across people and they ask me, where are you from? And when I tell them Eritrean, I would be the first person they would have met. And I've been living in the UK for the last 32 years, and still find that many people do not know about us. I think our community, yes, in terms of size, we might be quite small, but even with all that, we're less known nowadays. Probably through some restaurants and places like cafes, people might start to learn a bit about Eritrea, and some also finding friends at universities and other places. Great. Do you have any other questions that I would be happy to answer? And thank you for those who commented or asked good questions.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. No, no, jazakallah khair. So far, all the questions you have answered. I don't see any more questions coming in, but mashallah, there's so much information. There's so much information about Eritrea for us to learn about our past, our history in that sense. And I encourage everyone, please do your research. Go out there and learn about Eritrea as a country. If you're Eritrean or not, there's so much history when it comes to Eritrea, mashallah. So keep doing your research and learn more about Eritrea. Brother Abdurrahman, I mean, it's a lot of information that you have covered, and I know there's much more, but I know you summarized every bit uh, about Eritrea, past and present, inshallah. But what about the future? I know it's a maybe a political question because we don't want to get into politics. But when it comes to future of Eritrea, where do we as Eritreans want to see Eritrea? What
Okay.
do,
I think it's a very good question. The future is very important to our young people. And the Eritrean population, by the way, over 70% are under 30 years old. So it's a very young nation, even in terms of population. So the future should be really of great importance and interest to our young people, whether in the diaspora or inside Eritrea. Um, you remind me about this question while I'm answering. There's someone, is a Muslim Jawarti tribe the same as Tigrinya tribe? Thank you for. Okay, I'll answer this question in a minute. So the future is very important to all Eritreans, but mainly to our young Eritreans because it's their future. There are so many things to be optimistic about the future. First, as I said, the young generation, a young productive force in the country who can really play a huge role, and not just in governing the government, but also in driving the economic development of the country and also its protection. It's very crucial. With the Italian administration of Eritrea, small industries were introduced to Eritreans, and Eritreans were discovered to be some of the most hardworking people in that part of the world. We're very workaholic or work-loving people, very disciplined and very productive people, whether we are in agriculture or in small industries. So there is that tradition that's always useful for any country's well-being and development. The second, the current status of dictatorship in Eritrea will pass on. Yani it will not stay there for forever. Like in any countries, it goes through ups and downs, but we will get there. These people will move on. They will obviously waste a bit of our time and energy and resources, which is unfortunate, but it's a price to be paid. And then once they move on, a lot of Eritreans already are speaking about the future, making it more constitutional. So it's a country of rule of law. It should also be governed by consensus, by democracy. And that's why you need to make sure the governing system of the country allows the people to be participants, not just recipients from top down, from someone ruling or ruler coming and telling people what to do and what not to. But the people have their own freedom and sovereignty, both at their local levels, in their villages, regions, towns, and then at the national level also with their other fellow Eritreans from the different linguistic and ethnic groups. As I said, about 9 plus, in my opinion, about 11 Eritrean language groups and so many tribes and 6 regions or even more. Some people say 9 regions based on the old division of the regions, the administrative regions. In any case, it's always good to have an administrative or governing system that allows people to govern themselves locally and to also be part of the shared governance or rule nationally. And this is also one of my area of, I would say, expertise. I studied this in particular about the systems of governance in multi-ethnic, plural societies, especially those coming from conflicts and so on. And I felt I can really help, inshallah, and contribute to the way how Eritrea could be governed that becomes like accommodative of all the diversity we have within the country, inshallah. The third area is, so as I mentioned, the tradition of the people of being work oriented, and also the future of all Eritreans who wish to have a rule of law and constitutional system of governance. And then the third one, the resources we have in Eritrea. We have like a long sea coast, which is unspoiled to this date. And that has its own marine resource like fish. The Red Sea fish is the best in the world. So all we need is just to have a few companies owned by the government or the people to exploit this resource and even have factories and start exporting to the UK and to other parts of the world. So there is the marine resource. There's also oil and gas in Eritrea, which has not been exploited yet, but definitely it's confirmed there we have oil and gas in the country, inshallah. Potassium is another important mineral. It's already been discovered and it's been exploited as we speak now. Gold, the same thing. We have large reserves of gold. Of course, anything exploited under the current system is not going to be of benefit to the people as much because the government is completely not interested in the interests of the people, the long term and even the short term. But it's okay. As we said, this is a government that will pass on. Eritrea as a whole will remain and its people will remain, inshallah. So that's another important resource to be optimistic about. Economically, Eritrea will be a very strong country. We're only about 5 million population wise. And 5 million, that's a very small population compared to Ethiopia to the south. It's 110 million. Sudan to the west and north, it's around 40 plus million people. Egypt is slightly up to the north, it's another 100 million population. So Eritrea compared to the surrounding area, Yemen across the sea, Saudi Arabia, they're all like larger populations, 10 plus million people. So Eritrea is very small, but very beautiful, very productive people, very passionate, very patriotic as well. And so this makes you, Eritrea could easily become a success story in a very short period of time. So the future looks very bright, I must say. The current darkness will end, and it will end very soon. The dictator we have there now, he's in his late 70s. I'm not sure how long he will be able to continue as strong as he is now. But in any case, he's not going to be immortal to live forever. There will come a time when he will age and be unable to rule. He might try to obviously pass on the rulership to his son or somebody like him. But I think the Eritrean people have become aware now they need better than what they have now. So the future looks very beautiful. The country infrastructure is also very good. Thanks to the Italians, the Eritrean hardworking people, there was a very good roads between towns in Eritrea, although they need a lot of maintenance and improvement now, many years later, but they're still quite good. So the towns are quite linked through roads. We used to have a very good railway link as well, but this was destroyed during the war, but it could be established again very quickly with some investment. The towns themselves as well, relatively compared to the Sudan or Ethiopia, I think we have very good towns with very good sewage and other infrastructures. So in Eritrea, when it rains, immediately the water disappears because you have a very good sewage system. Whereas those of you who live in Jeddah or Saudi Arabia, when it rains, the whole town, sinks. So we are, I think, we do have good infrastructure, inshallah, to build on or to improve on. So yes, it's a beautiful country, and everyone should become very optimistic. And تفاؤلوا بالخير in Arabic, or as Muslims we say تفاؤلوا بالخير تجدونه. Always be optimistic, and you'll find your optimism on the ground, inshallah. So that's it. Nuruddin, remind me of the questions that were asked. Someone was asking about Jabarti, whether they're part of the Tigrinya nation or nationality. Okay. The Tigrinya is a language and it's spoken by different tribes and regions in Eritrea, especially in the southern part of Eritrea. And the majority of Tigrinya speaking people are Christians. And within those, the majority of them are Orthodox Christians. That's the Abyssinian Church, the Coptic Church. It's similar to the Oriental Church, like the one in Egypt, in Lebanon, Greek, Russia, and all this Oriental Church. They're known as Orthodox Church. They have their own calendar, their own rituals, and everything else. So the majority of Eritrean Christians and Ethiopian Christians, they belong to this Orthodox Church in Eritrea. And then we have a minority who belong to the Catholic Church, and another minority that belong to the Protestant Church. And the Jabarti, their language is also Tigrinya, their main first language, but they are Muslims, and most of them use Arabic as either lingua franca to communicate with their other brothers and sisters from the other ethnic groups or language groups. or just to study their faith and Quran. So they would normally, especially the educated Jabarti, like many Eritreans, they would be bilinguals and sometimes trilinguals, depending on where they're living. So if they're living in predominantly Tigrinya areas, they would speak Tigrinya plus Arabic. If they're speaking in a Saho area or Tigray speaking area or Afar speaker or any other, they would still adapt the language, and they can easily communicate in more than one language. In terms of cultural identity, they tend to be separate from the rest of the Tigrinya speakers because their culture is very much influenced by their religion, just like the Christian Tigrinyas culture would be influenced by their faith or church. So would the Eritrean Muslim Tigrinya speakers would be influenced by their faith. So they would love to be identified, and many Eritreans also identify them as Jabarti, not as Tigrinya, but as Jabarti. So when someone tells you, I am a Jabarti, it means he would be or she would be a speaker of Tigrinya language, but definitely a Muslim. So it has its own cultural identity. They predominantly live within the southern region, which is predominantly Christian Tigrinya speaking. So that's where Jabartis live, like the regions like Saraye, Asmara, and Hamasin. And many of their communities also live in the lowlands like Karen, Akordat, and Masawa in smaller communities. You said Muslims and Christians opposed the union. Was it not mainly by Muslims? Okay. Yes, predominantly Muslims were opposed to the union with Ethiopia because at the time the church and the monarch of Ethiopia were one entity with two faces. So, and their definition of Ethiopia for many years, in fact, until very recently, until 1991, was that Ethiopia was a Christian land, which is not true because Ethiopia has over 80, that's 80 ethnic and linguistic groups, including Somalis, by the way, and they're the third largest group in Ethiopia. So not in Somalia proper, but the one that is now part of Ethiopia, they are the third largest group, and they're Muslims and they speak Somali. And then you have the Afaris who are related to the Eritrean Afar and Djiboutian Afar. They're very large as well, I think over 1.5 million to 2 million population. And then the Tigrinya speaking also in the south, in Tigray, where there's a conflict right now, and so are the rest. So Ethiopia, its definition as one monocultural and monolingual Amharic and mono-religion was completely wrong and misleading. So the influence of the church on the Eritrean elite was quite strong, and but across the board, like in terms of the population, they were like any Eritrean. They always wished to have independent Eritrea, independent of Ethiopia or independent of Italy. Um, However, the first Unionist Party was led by Christians predominantly, but they had some Muslims as well. And so the Muslims had to react to set up their own pro-independence party, the Muslim League of Eritrea. And but they then had also some Christians supporting independence, willingly to challenge the church influence and the Ethiopian incursions into Eritrea. So this is how the division was. But then when it came to the liberation struggle and to the whole, even the political struggle of the 40s and 50s, they more or less all really strived for independence. The elites, of course, they kept taking sides or decisions one way or the other, but the population really paid a huge price across the board, Christians and Muslims, to achieve Eritrean independence.
Jazakallah khair, brother Abdurrahman. Jazakallah khair. I mean, that's it. I mean, we're trying to wrap it up. I know it's been over an hour now, an hour and a half almost. But I would like to thank all your time, energy, and sharing your knowledge about Eritrea that many of us don't know about. and we're gonna go out there. And I urge everyone to go out there, do your research, because there's so much information that cannot be discussed or shared in one day. So inshallah, keep doing your research and find out more about Eritrea, especially the young ones out there and the next generation coming up. It is so important. You don't know who you are until you know your past, and know about your culture, inshallah. Brother Abdurrahman, I would like to say thank you so much for making that time. And if there's one last message that you want to leave to the Eritrean Muslim community and the community in general, what would it be?
Yeah, I would always encourage for any Eritrean in the diaspora to focus either on education or work and generate good income for yourself, your family, your community, and then your country. And here, the country could mean two countries. Your host country, this is a country that we love and has accepted us and made us part of it and opened access to different opportunities. So we have to be privileged and very honored and very grateful to the United Kingdom and respect the law of this land of the United Kingdom and always protect it and defend it as well against any harm, whether from our within our communities or any other person. This is our country. We have to be defensive. It's very much Islamic to protect the United Kingdom because it has given us sanctuary, just like the migration from Mecca to Eritrea to Abyssinia. At the time, it was ruled by a Christian king, Eritrea, or the whole Abyssinia. Yet they gave sanctuary to the Muslims. So Muslims respect the nations and societies that gives them sanctuary. We have to be very clear about that. We have to respect the law of this land. We have to also defend the freedoms, the rights that's been given to us. If you read the history of Europe, medieval Europe, during the Christendom, let alone Muslims and people of different colors within the Europeans themselves. If it was a Catholic nation, would not tolerate Protestants and vice versa. So there was a lot of conflicts even until 1945. All the conflicts were within Europeans, one trying to become superior to the other, and so on. So with liberal democracy, with secularism, a lot of opportunities have been created, equality and equality rights. Yes, it may not be the ideal world or a paradise that everyone might want to dream of, but still relatively and comparatively with so many other countries, including in Europe, I think we are better off. I travel a lot to Europe, and I always see the opportunities we have here in the United Kingdom is far greater and better than our Eritrean and other minority immigrant communities in European countries. So we have to appreciate this privilege that we have and do our best to contribute to the well-being of this country. So if we are wealthy people, make sure you contribute through charity in Ramadan and other times to projects like homeless, cancer research, and any other. Sorry about the noise, but it's not coming from me. Anyway, so the two countries that I'm talking about. So if you're a wealthy person through charitable activities, you can support cancer research, homeless alleviation of homelessness, and drug issues in inner city areas, all the crimes that we keep hearing about, how to reduce it and what to do about it. Be engaged in the local civic democracy and civic issues where you can have a market contribution to. Through your community centers like the Nagashi Tradition Center or any other centers we may have across the country. Always be part of the local community and be engaged and be open and tolerant to the diversity as well. It's very important that we respect others for their difference, with all their differences, whether it's ethnic, religious, whatever it may be. And the second thing is also to support your own host country, your parents' country, your country, that's Eritrea, and also the Eritreans across the world in the diaspora, if there is any need and if you can make any contribution. So to enable you to do that, you have to have either the wealth that you have accumulated through legitimate means, that's halal means, or the education, the knowledge. Those two are very key factors that you can use to contribute your share to the well-being of your host country as well as your home country. That's the country of origin. So my advice and focus would be to encourage our young people either to go for vocational training and employment, whether it's self-employment or seeking employment somewhere else, without undermining or looking down at any employment. Every employment that you can earn legitimate halal income, it's the best you can find, and the most acceptable, inshallah. So do for employment. Do not sit idle. Do not do nothing. Do something. Education is also very important. And education, by the way, in Muslim tradition, it is said or it's reported that Muslims are encouraged to study or to seek education from birth to death. There is no limit. Yes, you might do your degree in 3 years or 4 or 5 years, but then that's not the end of it. You should always seek knowledge. You should always train and upgrade yourself, especially if you're in a technical field or medical field. You keep updating yourself. Like with the coronavirus, every time there's a new variant, so you have to do constantly research to identify the problem and then diagnose and find a solution to it. So those two factors are very important. I would really encourage you to do that. The third one is really to focus on your unity as well. As Eritreans, we are diverse. There's no problem with that. In the Quran, it says it's actually a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He created us with different languages and colors. And tribes and nations as well. So it's absolutely fine. It's a beauty. That's what makes this world beautiful. The diversity itself is beautiful. No one is better than the other by what they look like or what skin color they have or what ethnic group they belong to. You're only good or less good by what you do, what you contribute to the well-being of yourself and your community and the society at large. So do become very tolerant to each other as well as to others, and introduce your young brothers, young children, young sisters, mothers, everyone to the history of Eritrea. And as well as to the history of the United Kingdom, and if you're in Sweden or wherever, to the history of Sweden, and so on. This is very important because I may have one culture that I brought from Eritrea, but my children here, who were born and brought up here, they could be considered like bicultural, sometimes even tricultural. And there is now a study about transcultural. That's someone who's lived in Eritrea, then moved to Saudi Arabia or Sudan, and then Egypt, and maybe several other countries, and then settled here. So the child is brought up through different cultures. Those would be considered like transcultural people. So for the older members of the Eritrean community to recognize this and to not make their children 100% Eritrean, or the children wanting to become 100% British. They can be the best of both. The best 100% of British with the best 100% of Eritrea, and that's perfectly good, and it would show in their self-esteem, in their identity, in their pride of who they are, and what cultures they reflect in their makeup and so on. So I think I would advise this, and keep up the good work, and keep in touch with Eritrea. And if you don't have any political problems or anything like that, if you can visit Eritrea, please do visit Eritrea. It's a beautiful country to visit. It's also good to just know Eritrea as it is, in a natural way, and get acquainted with it. And if you can establish a business or a house there, or if you can fix your father's house or your mother's house, do so without any hesitation, so you can have the good of both countries, inshallah. I think with that, I will come to an end. And thank you very much for listening to me, for giving me this opportunity. And I'll be happy to always answer any calls from you guys if you want me to give any similar talks in future, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Yeah, Zakallah, Brother Abdurrahman, thank you so much. And thank you for making the time. Me personally, I have learned a lot about Eritrea. And inshallah, we'll keep continuing as a community to learn more and more, inshallah, about Eritrea. And we're definitely going to invite you, inshallah, for future lectures about Eritrea, inshallah. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
You
Masala.
too. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for watching. Mashallah, that was so much information about Eritrea. Very important for us as a community to know and understand, especially if we call ourselves Eritreans, then we need to know about our culture, about our country. So, because that's in the end is our identity as Eritrean Muslims. So, it is very important for us to learn about that. So, I encourage every Eritrean out there to learn and especially the your children or the young ones to make sure they learn about their country and you educate them about their culture. So when they grow up, inshallah, they can identify themselves as Eritrean Muslims, inshallah. Um, yeah, as I said in the beginning of the show, this month is the Eritrean Cultural Festival 2021, and we have organized a monthly, weekly events. Just gonna, if you can look at the screen here, if you look at the screen here, today, the 6th of June, we had Brother Abdurrahman talking about the past, present, and future of Eritrea. Next week, Sunday, the 13th of June, we have Ali Haji here as a special guest, and he will be talking about the Eritrean Muslims' identity in the West. The week after that, the 20th of June, we're talking about the Eritrean brothers and sisters that sacrificed to liberate Eritrea from the colonizers. And we're going to hear stories from different guests about the different people that sacrificed themselves, who they were, and what they did to liberate Eritrea, and to show that respect because they sacrificed their life and everything they had to liberate Eritrea. And then on the last event, the 26th of June, if the weather is nice, inshallah, we're gonna have a big community cultural event where families and children from all ages they will be coming together in their beautiful traditional clothing and traditional foods, and we'll have an amazing event where all the children and the youth will learn and see more about their culture. We're gonna have like a bun area where you see all the mothers doing all the bun areas, serving Eritrean coffee, bun. We're gonna have nice children activities where they're gonna have face painting, henna, all about our culture, inshallah. And we're gonna have also a picture area for families to take pictures with their family and friends. And we're gonna have some performance, some Eritrean poets and performance from the Eritrean community displaying about Eritrean culture. And it's gonna be a lovely event, but all depends on the weather on that day. It's going to be an outdoor event. Everything's going to be safe in a safely manner. COVID safety measures are in place for everyone to enjoy and have a good time, inshallah. So please tune in every week, Sunday, 7:30 for the next 3 weeks. And get ready for the big culture event on the 26th of June, inshallah. And if you have any questions, you got the number there. Please call us or email us if you have any questions. If you can help and support with everything with regarding the online events and especially the community event, please get in touch with us. If you can donate, we need all the help and support financially to give a beautiful, amazing cultural event for our community. So please donate wherever you can. If it's £10, £20, please donate and please make the effort. Share this to all the people in the community. Share, invite your friends, your work colleagues, your neighbors. Everybody is welcome, and it is important for people to know about our culture and who we are as Eritreans. To the non-Eritreans out there, so please invite them as well and bring them to the event, inshallah, and let them taste the Eritrean foods and be among ourselves, and they can find out what kind of people we are, inshallah. But this is enough for me from now. Thank you for coming, and see you guys next week, Sunday, with Ali Haji about our identity as Eritrean Muslims in the West. Jazakallah khair wa ma'a salama.